There are moments when a fall from grace doesn't happen all at once, but instead happens in slow, humiliating stages, like a curtain being pulled back inch by inch, revealing a reality that becomes more uncomfortable every single time you look at it. And what is happening right now to Prince Andrew is starting to look less like a temporary retreat and more like something far more deliberate, far more controlled, and far more permanent than anyone is willing to say out loud yet. Because the story now coming out of Sandringham is not just about a disgraced royal living quietly in the countryside. It is about residents, locals, neighbors, ordinary people living near the royal estate who have reportedly started raising concerns about security, concerns about attention, concerns about media, concerns about the constant shadow that follows Andrew everywhere now. And suddenly the quiet life he was supposed to be living is not so quiet anymore. And that clip sets the tone for everything that follows. Because what we are watching is not just a man moving house, this is a man being moved, repositioned, managed, and the deeper you look into this situation, the more it starts to feel like every part of his new life is being quietly controlled by people who are trying to contain a problem that refuses to stay contained. Because Sandringham was supposed to be the place where things went quiet, where scandals cooled down, where the world stopped looking so closely, but instead what seems to be happening is the opposite. Because when locals start talking, when residents start raising concerns, when whispers start turning into polite complaints and polite complaints start turning into restrictions, that is when you know a situation is changing again. Think about the psychology of this for a moment, because this is where it gets really interesting. Andrew has already lost the big things: the public role, the titles, the royal duties, the patronages, the grand house, the public support. Those losses were loud, public, dramatic. The whole world saw them happen, but what is happening now is different. This is the loss of the small things, and sometimes the small losses are the ones that really tell you how far someone has fallen. Because now we are talking about village events, local gatherings, community functions, quiet social appearances, the kind of events that nobody would have even noticed Andrew attending 10 years ago, and now suddenly those are the events he reportedly cannot attend. Those are the places where people are uncomfortable. Those are the rooms where his presence changes the atmosphere. And that tells you something that no official statement will ever say directly. Because when residents raise concerns, what does that actually mean? It means conversations are happening behind closed doors. It means organizers are making careful phone calls. It means someone is saying maybe it would be better if he didn't come, and nobody writes that down. Nobody announces that publicly. Nobody issues a press release saying a prince is not welcome at a village event, but the message still gets delivered quietly, politely, indirectly, in that very British way where nothing is said directly and yet everything is understood. And this is where the story starts to shift from a royal scandal to something much more personal. Because imagine the reality of that situation. Imagine going from state banquets, royal ascot, diplomatic receptions, and international events to a place where the biggest social event available to you is a nearby village function, and then imagine being told quietly, indirectly, that maybe it would be better if you didn't attend that either, that maybe your presence would cause disruption, that maybe the media would show up, that maybe the residents are uncomfortable, that maybe it's just not a good idea right now, not officially banned, not publicly excluded, just quietly not invited. And if that is what is happening, then that is not just a restriction, that is something else entirely. That is social isolation. And social isolation is a very powerful thing, especially for someone who has spent an entire lifetime inside institutions, inside systems, inside structures where access, invitation, and inclusion were never things he had to think about before. Because for most of his life, doors opened automatically, invitations arrived automatically, chairs were pulled out automatically, and now suddenly everything is manual, everything is negotiated, everything is conditional, and that is a completely different way to live. But here is where the story gets even more complicated, because the official line, the public line, will always be about security, about privacy, about ongoing investigations, about not wanting media attention around local events. Those are the reasons that will be given, and maybe those reasons are even true, but there is always the official reason, and then there is the real reason, and the real reason is usually about reputation, optics, and risk. Because every time Andrew appears somewhere, the story follows him, the cameras follow him, the headlines follow him, and suddenly, a quiet village event is not a quiet village event anymore. It becomes an international news story, and that is exactly what the royal family does not want right now. So the question becomes, who is really making these decisions? Is it the residents? Is it the local organizers? Is it royal security? Is it palace advisors? Is it Andrew's own legal team telling him to stay out of public view while the investigation continues? Or is it a combination of all of them? Each conversation, each concern, each quiet request slowly building a new invisible wall around him. A wall made not of stone, but of social pressure, reputational risk, and institutional caution. Because here is the thing about restrictions. The most effective restrictions are the ones that nobody officially announces. The ones that just become understood over time. The ones where invitations stop arriving, where schedules stop including your name, where people start saying things like, maybe next time, or not this year, or it might be better to wait, and before you realize what is happening, you are not part of the social world anymore, not officially excluded, just gradually removed. And if Sandringham residents really are raising concerns, then what we are seeing might be the beginning of the final stage of this entire saga, not the loud public fall that already happened. This is the quiet part, the part where life gets smaller, where the world gets closer, where the number of places you can go, the number of people you can see, the number of events you can attend, slowly, quietly, almost politely, starts to shrink. Because scandals do not just destroy careers, they destroy access, they destroy invitations, they destroy the invisible network of social acceptance that powerful people rely on without even realizing it. And once that network starts to disappear, once the invitations stop, once the doors stop opening, once the rooms become uncomfortable when you walk in, that is when the real consequences begin. Not in courtrooms, not in headlines, but in the quiet moments when you realize that the world you used to move through so easily is no longer available to you. And what makes this story so uncomfortable, so fascinating, and so difficult to look away from is that it is happening in slow motion. One restriction at a time, one move at a time, one conversation at a time, one quiet request at a time, until one day you wake up and realize that the life you used to live exists only in photographs, and the life you live now is something completely different, something smaller, something quieter, something much more controlled. And the most unsettling part of all of this is that nobody is standing up and announcing these changes, nobody is explaining them, nobody is confirming them. They are just happening, quietly, politely, behind closed doors, which is exactly how the most serious decisions in these kinds of institutions are always made, not with announcements, but with arrangements. And the deeper you look into this situation, the more it begins to feel like Sandringham is not just a residence, not just a quiet countryside retreat, but something closer to a controlled environment, a place where movements are noted, where appearances are calculated, where every outing becomes a discussion. And when residents start raising concerns, that adds another layer of pressure that cannot be ignored, because the royal family understands something very clearly. Public image is not only shaped in palaces and parliaments, it is shaped in villages, in churches, in local halls, in small gatherings where people talk freely, where opinions are formed quietly, where reputations either recover slowly or collapse completely. And what we are hearing now in whispers and small reports and quiet conversations is that Andrew's presence is no longer seen as neutral. It is seen as a problem, not necessarily because of anything he is doing right now, but because of everything that has already happened. Because every scandal leaves a shadow, and that shadow follows you into every room, every event, every gathering, and eventually people start asking a very simple question. Is it worth the trouble to have him here? Because that is what this comes down to in the end, not titles, not rank, not history, not who he used to be, but whether his presence creates complications. And if the answer to that question is yes, then the invitations stop, the appearances stop, the public life stops, and what you are left with is a kind of quiet exile that nobody officially calls exile. And there is something very important about the timing of all this, because these reported concerns from residents are not happening in isolation. They are happening while investigations are ongoing, while documents are being reviewed, while officials are having meetings, while decisions about his future, his status, and his place inside the royal structure are still being discussed behind closed doors. And when you look at all of these things together, the move to Sandringham, the restrictions on movement, the controlled visitors, the quiet life, and now the reported concerns from locals, it begins to look less like a temporary arrangement and more like a long-term plan. Because institutions like the monarchy do not react quickly, they react slowly, carefully, strategically, and when when they begin to create distance, they do it step by step, privilege by privilege, appearance by appearance, until eventually the distance becomes permanent, and by the time the public fully understands what has happened, the decision has already been made and there is no way back. And that is why this story about Sandringham residents raising concerns is actually much bigger than it sounds. Because it is not really about residents, it is about acceptability. It is about whether Andrew can exist quietly in public spaces without causing disruption, and if the answer is no, then the only solution is to remove the public spaces from his life entirely. Imagine what that means on a personal level, because for someone who has lived his entire life surrounded by people, staff, events, ceremonies, appearances, travel, and constant activity, the sudden silence of a controlled life must be deafening. The days must feel longer, the world must feel smaller, and every new restriction, every new quiet request, every new place he is advised not to go must feel like another door closing. And the most brutal part of this kind of situation is that it does not happen all at once. It happens slowly enough that you can see it happening, slowly enough that you understand what is being taken away, slowly enough that every new restriction feels like a message, not spoken directly, but understood perfectly clearly. First, the public duties disappeared, then the titles became unusable, then the patronages were gone, then the Royal Lodge became a battle he could not win, then the move happened, then the restrictions began, and now even the possibility of quietly appearing at nearby events is reportedly becoming a problem. And when you line those events up one after another, it stops looking like coincidence and starts looking like a pattern of removal, a pattern of distancing, a pattern of quiet separation between one man and the institution that once protected him. And the question that nobody is answering directly, but everyone is clearly thinking, is how far this distancing will go. Because once a process like this begins, it rarely stops halfway. And then there is the other side of this story, the side people do not talk about as much, the side that involves the people around him, the family members whose own reputations, roles, and public images are affected by every headline connected to his name. Because the monarchy is not just a family, it is an institution. And institutions survive by protecting the whole, not the individual. And if protecting the whole means creating more and more distance from one individual, then that is what institutions do, slowly, carefully, and permanently. So when you hear that residents have raised concerns, you should not just hear a small local story, you should hear something much bigger. You should hear the sound of the circle getting smaller, the world getting quieter, the list of places he can go getting shorter, and the list of places he cannot go getting longer. Not because of a formal announcement, not because of a written rule, but because of a reality that everyone understands without needing to say it out loud. And the truth is, the most powerful bans are not the ones written on paper, they are the ones enforced by silence, by absence, by the invitations that never arrive, by the events that happen without you, by the photographs taken where you are not standing in the background anymore. And if that is what is happening now in Sandringham, then this story is not about one restriction, it is about the final shape of a life that has been shrinking for years and may still be shrinking now. Because in the end, scandals do not just take away power, they take away normal life. And what we may be watching right now is not just a royal scandal continuing, but a man slowly disappearing from public life in real time. Not with one dramatic announcement, but with a series of quiet decisions, quiet concerns, quiet restrictions, until one day the disappearance is complete and nobody even remembers exactly when the last invitation stopped coming.